Well, as part of our visit to Santa Fe, New Mexico this past June 2019, the Big Blend Love Your Parks tour spent some time exploring the 13-acre Railyard Park with Christy Lee Downs, Shannon Palermo, and Rebecca de Agostine. And the three ladies, run what's known as the Railyard Park Conservancy. They do such awesome work. They maintain all these different gardens. There's an outdoor performance space, public art. There's picnic spots, children's play areas, youth programs. I mean, you name it, it's all there. It's very popular as a community destination as well as for travelers and visitors like Nancy and I here. I encourage you to go to their website. It's railyardpark.org. And we're super happy to have Christy and Rebecca on today's Big Blend Radio's Parks and Travel Show to give us an overview of the park and also explain how it aligns with our Love Your Parks Tour Mission Possible Stories series of Change, which was assigned by our friend Ralph Masengill, the author of Conquer, Change, and Win. So welcome to the show, Christy. How are you?
I'm good. Yes, we are in our summer months here and our busy season now, and they're running around the park doing a lot more than normal gardening work right now. So it's like
Cool.
Exciting time of year for us. We get a lot done.
Well,
Awesome.
I know, Nancy, we enjoyed it because it was so beautiful. We had flowers and butterflies and shady trees and water running through. So it was like this magical oasis. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Awesome. And Rebecca, you're also here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. So I know
Good.
Shannon, is she out playing with her bees? She's got her bee habitat, or is she leading another tour today?
Shannon is actually with a group of YCC, which is Youth Conservation Corps. They're an ASL group. They're from the New Mexico School for the Deaf, and today's their first day in the park. They're going to be with us the rest of the summer doing work in the park.
Oh, nice. Oh, I
That's
love that.
cool.
I love that. Yeah, Christy, I wanted to touch on this because when I say this is for a community, it's like it's community, it's business. So people are actually living on the outskirts of this park, right? It's a green space that was formerly a brown space and also has history in regards to being a rail yard, of course, which we can touch on later here in the story. But this is, where people live, they play. You want to give everybody just a brief overview of what this space encompasses.
Yeah, so the space itself, and you mentioned earlier, it's 13 acres of just the green space, the park itself, and it encompasses it's along two of the busiest intersections in Santa Fe. So we have a lot of people driving by, observing it from a car. We also have one of the main bicycle routes going along the west border of it, which is between the Rail Runner, which is on the old historic railroad route, right next to the rail trail, which borders our park. So there's it's kind of the meeting space and hub of transportation. A lot of people ride their bikes to work and come to the park. A lot of folks bounce back and forth between where they work, heading home. It's just a very it's a intersection of a lot of people crossing paths, but the whole area around it, especially on the west side and northwest side, is actually the Guadalupe Historic District. So there are old historic homes, a hop, skip, and a jump away from the park. And then the buildings, the businesses, mostly along the north side and the east side, a lot of those are in historic structures from the railroad era of the 1880s. And they're now cafes and movie theaters and other businesses inside. The movie theater is not in a historic building. It's a newer building. But some of the other buildings are very historic. There's some local gems. Some of the restaurants in town that have been around for a really long time that are incredibly popular have their tie to the rail yard as well. So the park is called the Railyard Park because 4 different rail lines converged. Most of them ended right in the rail yard. The narrow gauge track continued up into Colorado, but it was kind of wanting to be protected to preserve both the historical elements, but also that it was a convergence of the neighborhoods going into the downtown, a lot of tourist attractions and very, very well-known historical buildings that draw a lot of traffic in. So it's right at the convergence of those two things happening. and we have a lot of residents that are involved in terms of what they would like to have happen in their community space, how we represent them in our community space, as well as you mentioned the visitors and tourists that come into town and what they're looking to do with their free time. And we also, in terms of the programming that we create and enact in the park, trying to satisfy the needs and desires of families that live here and have settled here. It is a small community. It's not a very large city, but for those families that may be here, we try to bring programming that they would enjoy, that's outside, that's free, that's based on science and nature play, and provide that for them as well. So trying to meet everybody's needs in a way that's very simple, but that's free, and come and go as you please, no registration. You know, we represent everybody. So that's kind of the purpose of the park in the context of the immediate neighborhoods around it.
Yeah, because you suits Santa Fe, because everybody seems so relaxed. Like there's not that big hurry, you're driving yourself crazy feel like other cities have.
Becca, you correct me if I'm wrong. I know we're fairly new to this area too in terms of, you know, residency here in New Mexico, but I think there's something called Santa Fe time, which means kind of, it'll happen when it happens. And I think that's kind of a small town thing, although it's a capital and it's, you know, one of the oldest cities in the nation. But yeah, it is pretty slow in that way and relaxed and
I think that's
laid
important.
back.
It is laid back, and when you took us on a walk, you have these beautiful shade trees, and I think what was really neat is you have all these different gardens that also they represent the native plants of Santa Fe and New Mexico. But you also had what's called a waffle garden I want to talk about. But one of the gardens, too, because you have community, I know, these, you know, community, like the apartments and everything right there in those buildings. You've also got this community garden where people can come and do vegetable gardening and even the waffle garden. If you said that if, you know, people want to come and, you know, eat something, they can.
Yes. Beck, I don't know if you want to go on to talk about the context of the waffle garden and the orchard.
Sure, yeah. The waffle garden is a ancient Zuni gardening technique meant for like arid climates. So there are different cells in the waffle garden, circular garden, and through it runs a channel which fills with water from the Acequia Madre, which is the oldest ditch in New Mexico. I think it's like over 400 years old. It was dug up by the Spanish. And yeah, so that we have water rights on Mondays, and that waters our waffle garden. And throughout the spring, student groups come and plant tomatoes, they plant spinach, corn, beans, squash, and over the summer we kind of water it, maintain it, and then once all of that those vegetables grow, the community is welcome to come just pick whatever they want and eat it. And similarly, the orchard, we have an orchard along Cerrillos Road, which is the busiest road in Santa Fe. And there's over, I want to say like 30 apple and apricot trees.
Wow.
And those are starting to fruit right now. And same thing, those are, you know, people can walk through the orchard, pick apples, pick apricots. Yeah, so it's really nice community space. Community garden. Yeah, it's great.
It's really neat. And then what was really fascinating also, the native plant species that you had, you know, there's butterflies and squirrels and birds hanging out everywhere. And, of course, people hanging out under the shade trees. It is just this really peaceful way of just chilling out. And, you know, no matter where you're coming from, you're just going to chill out there. But also the one part that I thought was really fascinating was there was like, it's a native garden. You had also like those aloe flowers, aloe plants, and they were all kind of intertwined within the actual rail line itself, the railroad tracks itself. So that was kind of like, here's your new garden merging in with rail history, which you wouldn't expect to see like that. Christy, you want to tell us a bit about that? Because that's really unique. I don't think you'll see that very many places in this country.
Yeah, you know, me in particular, I love history. I love local history. I love railroad history. So my favorite part of the whole park is actually that rail garden in the north end of the park, which there are, I mentioned the 4 rail lines that came in through Santa Fe. Actually, technically there are 5 now with the Rail Runner, the current commuter train, but the 4 historic lines that all met in Santa Fe. And there are original rail lines. I don't know which one went with which track, but those are all placed in the rail gardens as landscape architectural elements. They create these nice linear lines that actually trace the path of the original rail lines. And those 4 lines all end with a boxcar axle that's been welded to the rail lines. So in case, I think some people walking through the park, they may see a rail line and without the context of a boxcar axle, I think those elements would get missed. So I really like that there's the boxcar element there that fits perfectly, and people go, oh, okay, this is a rail line. Oh, I get it. And those rail lines form the basis of the actual containers for the gardens. And that rail garden area, as opposed to the other places in the park, which are more, there's more curvature and topography. It's more organic. We're letting more wildflowers and native grasses move, and it's just a little more organic. But the rail gardens are very geometrical, and the gardens that we were walking through of the native plantings are planted in straight lines and either in pairs or triplets, and it's just very geometrical. I like that. If you like order, you'll probably love the rail gardens. And each of those plantings are grouped together to represent cargo that would have come off of the boxcars, loading things like coal or wood, flour, or even livestock. So those are represented there. Though there's not signage, you can kind of be creative as to what was coming off. But the idea was that garden was noticeably different, with a different style and purpose than the rest of the park.
That's interesting because, we're talking about a story of change, that it's like, here, this was where this was moving at this time, cargo was coming in, and you even have a 50-year-old caboose there too on the property. But so here it is, and now it's this beautiful garden. But you're having what Nancy, wouldn't you say that you feel like a sense of balance, where when we were walking around, it was like a nod to the past, a nod to actual New Mexico plants and natural history of then and now, but also people and transport history. There was that balance of then and now. Didn't you feel that, Nancy?
Yeah, and I think it sparks interest. When you're wandering around, you start to wonder, well, I wonder what this was for, and I wonder how it worked over here. And I think it's really good for both adults and kids.
Right. And one thing I will add, too, is the park acts as a botanical garden. There is a botanical garden here in Santa Fe where all the plants are labeled and marked, and if you're really interested in studying individual species, it's great for that. The park is very similar in some ways in that the diversity is there, the native plantings are there, there's ornamental and native plants, but there's not a lot of signage. And what you were saying was that was intentional. It was like, get people into the park and let them discover it on their own. And we are, hoping to share some of this with people so that they know that the rail lines are the 4, there's not a sign that really states all that information. But for those that are really curious, it can be fun to discover that kind of thing. And when we're able to do tours and share that, people are like, oh, that's why the Rose Ramada is a circle. Oh, that's why there's a platform that goes across it. It's like the turnstile of, what every rail line ended with was these turnstiles to turn the train caboose around. And those, I think it makes it a little fun to discover it instead of being told what to think or feel. And so that is interesting. We do try to share that anyway with people because there's always new people coming into town. And actually, Rebecca's working on a self-guided tour that we'll have ready soon so that those that are really, they do want to know what it is, they can pull up our website or pick up a brochure from one of the local restaurants and walk through the park and and find where the time capsule is, because you have to discover it. And if you don't have much time, you can actually take this tour and read more about the native bee house, or read more about the 400-year-old Acequia Madre, and kind of discover it a little more. And that was designed that way on purpose.
And so just jumping off of that too, it's that walking tour also talks a little bit about the history of how and why the railroad was so important for Santa Fe, not just the Railyard, but the entire city of Santa Fe. Because before that, it was just ox and wagon, old school style on the old Santa Fe Trail. The railroad really modernized the city, and I think a lot of tourists maybe don't know the history of why that's so important. So I don't know, it's just something interesting that I think the walking tour will help people to kind of understand that a little bit more and understand the context of the park.
Yeah, and I think the rail history, I mean, it helped shape the Southwest and the West. I mean, the railroad history is massive. It really plays a huge role in developing our country. So it's really cool to get that know-how. And I love that walking tour, because is that Rebecca, is that part of what, the flyer that we have in front of us? Is that what you were working on for that?
Yeah, that's sort of the preliminary pre-draft of it. Yeah. You guys are lucky. You got a sneak peek.
We like sneak peeks. Hey, listen, and Priscilla, our little sock monkey, had a good time out there too. I just want to bring that up. But you know what she told me? Our little sock monkey, travel mascot, everyone. She's a little feisty one. She told me that I need a big, a roundhouse that the trains did to move their cabooses around, because apparently she says I need a big place to move my caboose. I'm just saying. You know how she is. You know how she is.
She's sassy little sock monkey.
Sassy. Yes, she is. She loves all the bike racks you guys have too. The other part, when you talking about, you've got the rail history, but also these self-guided tours. I think these are great. People, especially now with people going on Instagram, you start learning of, okay, what is that plant I just photographed? Because now I need to have a hashtag. So the hashtag education world. But when we were there, you were talking about school groups. You talked about that at the beginning of our conversation today. Rebecca, you want to give us some overviews of for families living there, and even people coming into town, what kind of programs are available for the community?
Yeah, well, we've got something for everyone. I mean, we do field trips. If a teacher wants to get out of the classroom for the day and take their kids to an outdoor space, we can give them a tour of the park. We can do an activity with them, something educational, having to do with science or biology. We also do in-service programs with school groups. Most of these groups come for, maybe one day a week for the year, and they tackle projects in the park and learn a little bit. We do nature play. This is free for families, mostly in the summertime and fall. We do Sand Play Saturday, which is probably our most popular program. It's aimed at toddlers and their families, and it's every Saturday in the summer for 2 hours. Our sand area is this really big, beautiful sandbox. It's super fun. We have all of these kitchen utensils, funnels, toys. We've got Tonka trucks this year. We fill up big buckets of water, and sometimes we'll have a sprinkler going, and if it's a really hot day, it's nice to just be able to cool off. Kids love playing with sand and exploring the properties of water and sand. Yeah, it's really fun. I was there on Saturday, and it was super cute.
Cool. Did you get out there and play in the sand?
Yeah, I sometimes do. I like to leave the kids to kind of explore and do their thing and not really interfere too much, but occasionally I make a sandcastle. Like being at the beach.
It also goes with how your playground is, too. Christy, you were telling us, and this kind of really gets into that story of change part of how the community came together, the city, and I know businesses are involved, individuals, of taking what was a brown space, and of course, when it's a rail yard, there's like chemicals and things like that get into the ground, but this is like totally revitalized, and this big plan came together. But before we get 100% into that, the children's area I think the whole thing sparks imagination with what you're doing. And it seems that the kids area, the children's playground is also like that.
Right. The children's play area is almost a full circular shaped space in the center of the park. And it was placed in the center so that it would be kind of insulated from the outskirts of the park and the busy roads. But one section of the outside circle is a pollinator garden, so a scent garden, and it is right on the backside of the two-tiered sand pits that Becca was talking about. And those plants all have a scent, and there's a variety of different shaped flowers, and we'll take people through there when we're talking about pollinators. But on the other side of the circle is called the very large array of slides. So if you're familiar with the very large array of satellites, it's kind of like harking to these elements that are very New Mexican, but it's this half circle of an embankment. The back side of the embankment is probably about 20 to 25 feet tall, but it's actually a bouldering wall. And a lot of the older kids have discovered that on their own, that this is a great wall to climb up, and there's some hangs and things like that. And the kids really enjoy just climbing on the wall. There's no signs that tell you this is a climbing wall, but it was designed to be discovered in that way. And kids get to feel like there's a sense of risk when they're climbing a wall. And the elements in the children's play area, besides the 3 little spinning gyroscopes, which kids love those, which is kind of more like a typical playground equipment, everything else is natural. It's basically putting together natural elements in such a way designed by early childhood education specialists and landscape architects together to see how do we create a play area that doesn't rely on play equipment, which I'm not going to say it's boring play equipment, but when you just plop down a slide and you plop down a swing and you plop down a basketball court, it's hard to be creative with those spaces. But with the Railyard Park, things are placed in such a way that kids feel like they're discovering how to play with something. It was designed that way on purpose. But so there's some slides of different height. There's the bouldering wall. There's a tunnel. There's the spinning gyroscopes. There's an amphitheater and a labyrinth, the sand pits, and all in that area. There's also a ropes course, and kids just discover it. You don't have to tell them what to do. They think for themselves as to how to make this space creative. And it's fun watching that happen in a very natural way. And every kid will interact with it in a different way, and that That's also cool. Is just very intentional.
It's like the outdoors. The equipment you have is outdoors. It's not like it's like an indoor equipment kind of feel. Like in a gymnasium or something. It's like I'm going to go climb a tree.
Yes, yes. And part of the planning of it, like, yes, there's a 25-foot bouldering wall. It's not as dangerous as that sounds, but the idea was over the last generation or two, we've removed risk from children as they're developing, and we kind of want to encourage kids to take a little bit of risk when they're playing, or to develop your cognitive skills as well as your muscular skills, large and small skills when you're climbing something or you're interacting with something. So it introduces risk on a very small level, and that's really healthy for kids, especially in this newer generation that actually is new to them. So that was intentional as well, that it is not sterile and very indoor feeling, but it is very outdoor feeling, and there's dirt and mud and sand, and you do with it what you want. So
instead of
how you build confidence, you build confidence when you take a little risk.
Yes, and that's exactly what it is you can learn how to go outside on a hike is not so foreign for you if you've kind of had small doses of the same thing in an urban setting.
Right. Cool.
It's really cool. I love that you're doing that for kids, and it really goes into like when the story is a story of conquering change, right? And so, Christy, when you look at what has happened with this space going from brown to green and the community coming together, I know that when that happens, everyone's got their opinions, and everyone has to come together on it to make it happen. And something like this playground is one of those examples of, hey, let's not do the typical playground. Let's do something that's going to make kids think, take risks. That's that conversation, like, let's do something different. I want to step back, Christy, with this brown space. What would the park look like today if there wasn't any change to it?
You mean if the brown space had been allowed to
just get
developed with the if it was just sat there? Well, I would imagine it would be kind of it would have been a derelict space the way it was before. And I would say the brown space itself, I don't think was a total blight, because some people really enjoyed that it was kind of a lost piece of land so close to downtown. However, there was a lot of, I want to call backwoods, but there was a lot of kind of just activity there that is not what a public space is designed for. So, yeah, or just kind of, people would go off-roading in there and just do whatever, and so it was not necessarily a place people felt comfortable walking through. So when it was a brown field, the community knew that the space could be really critical. It was an open spot in the midst of development in terms of retail and hotel and downtown, and initially it was slated to be its own development with condos and things like that, and the community got word of that and decided, well, we don't want it to become that. We do think there needs to be some retail and some re-envisioning of something new for Santa Fe, which is where the Railyard district comes into play. So the park is the 13 acres on the south end, but there was this whole section of open land, and it took about 15 years for the community to meet regularly and take stakeholders' feedback, decipher that into the core elements of what they wanted, which was they wanted a park, they wanted local business, they wanted the Railyard to not look or feel like downtown. So the Railyard was going to be a place to be industrial. So a lot of the buildings are more industrial looking, and that they bring in some railroad historical elements, but also some contemporary elements. So it's different than the downtown plaza. And that was intentional as well. The community, that was their feedback, but the emphasis was on local business. So over time, over the last 11 years since that district was built and designed and kind of underway, we've got like one of the best local movie theaters ever. The Violet Crown Cinema is like a anchor business in the Railyard, and we have Second Street Brewery and REI and a clay, clay
New Mexico
studio
clay,
where you can come and take classes. Yeah, and then we've got the Farmers Market Pavilion is probably, I think it's been voted the best farmers market in the Southwest, if not the state. But it's an incredibly popular.
Well done.
And it's just really kind of amazing. Santa Fe's pretty small, but their farmers market is really popular. And in the summer, it's Tuesday and Saturday, and I think they have a Wednesday evening, and that's right across the street from the park. And that brings a lot of people, tourists and locals who are shopping, but they get to meet and talk with their farmers. We actually do a program with local students where we pick up the vegetable scraps from the farmers before the old bruised stuff, and we take it and we compost it in the park. So
excellent.
Our role is that we have a little connection to each of the businesses in the Railyard, and they feel connected to the park. So we've really appreciated all the partnerships from all the businesses surrounding us too, and a lot of them have become members, so they've donated some money to support our work, or they come and do community service days like Becca was talking about, where staff can do like a few hours of gardening and learn how to garden and feel like they've given back to their community. So it's been a good space to do that, where everyone can interact together outside of their business setting.
This is awesome. Again, like here's a positive story of change going from brown to green, but also when you think about how railroads really helped influence the West, the Southwest, and the world, in regards to commerce. Now your commerce has changed, to where it's actually, instead of it being delivered, people are coming there and actually enjoying the space and going and getting their fresh fruits and vegetables versus ones that have been, mass produced. Anyway, just saying.
It's good. That's really, people here, there's very core elements to what the people here value, which is organic produce, local history, and keeping the local culture intact. And actually, National Geographic, I think last year, voted Santa Fe the city with the best sense of place, because it was so, it's been so important to the people that live here to keep the culture intact, because we have this interesting overlay in terms of geography. We have an incredible number of Native American tribes and pueblos that are all surrounding Santa Fe. We also have Spanish settlers, multi generations of very key family generational lines that are here in Santa Fe, as well as people that have moved in and come from other places. And the intersection of all those over Santa Fe is really interesting too. But the city planners and the residents here have tried to make sure those elements stay intact. And those are actually within the Railyard as well. There's a museum called El Museo, which does a lot of local, regional art and festivals that are so interesting. We just had Current's New Media Festival, which is this very edgy, kind of forthsightful art that takes place in the Railyard. And so it's just kind of a smattering of all these different interests that are all just in the Railyard.
Impressive. And here we are, everybody. Another story of change for Ralph Masengill, author of Conquer, Change, and Win. Check out his site, conquerchangeandwin.com. Awesome story, and also a destination for all of you going to Santa Fe. Check out railyardpark.org. And when you're there, be sure to go to the Rose Garden, too. That's especially a beautiful spot in the garden and in the park. And we want to thank Christy, Rebecca, and also Shannon for taking us around. And thank you, girls, for joining us on the show. We have a special song to play. This is Catch That Train from David T. Dunn, and you can keep up with him at davidtdunnmusic.com. Here it is, Catch That Train.
So Catch that train.
Nancy and Lisa, and of course, precious Priscilla. This is Ralph Masengill, author of Conquer, Change, and Win. Well done on completing another installment of your Stories of Change series on your Love Your Parks tour.